It's the UN's 80th anniversary, and amid the ongoing wars and conflicts and famine, there is little to celebrate. I sat down with UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres to talk about the challenges facing the world body. I'm Frank Ucciardo, and you're watching TRT World One-on-One. Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, thank you for joining us here on TRT World.
It's a great pleasure to be with you.
Mr. Secretary, you are the world's leading diplomat, but basically the moral conscience of an entire UN General Assembly, aren't you?
Well, I do my best. I think this is a moment in which we see conflicts multiplying, geopolitical divides. We see international law not being respected. We see the suffering of people in the most dramatic humanitarian situations. And at the same time, we see climate change moving without control. And so it is very important that an institution like the UN represents the moral conscience of humankind and is able to speak up and to speak out denouncing what is wrong and making sure that the values of the UN Charter, of international law, of international humanitarian law, and that the values of international solidarity that are typical of a multilateral institution like the UN, it's essential that that voice be as loud as possible to compensate for the dramatic and sometimes chaotic development that we see in so many challenging problems of the world.
I don't think I've seen in the last 2 decades such indifference to the UN Charter.
It's true. We are seeing more violations of international law than ever. We see big powers invading other countries, disrespecting their territorial integrity. We see the Palestinian people, after the horrific attacks of Hamas, but we see today the Palestinian people being victim of an absolutely horrendous situation with complete violations of international law. We see in Sudan a civil war that seems endless with tremendous suffering. And at the same time, we see the inequalities growing. We see developing countries in a difficult situation, and we have been asking for the reform not only of the Security Council in relation to questions of peace and security, but the reform of international financial institutions, international financial architecture. It was determined after the Second World War in a world that was very different. Many of today's countries were colonies at that time. They did not participate. And so we have a financial system that is not designed to defend developing countries, but is essentially designed to defend those that founded it. And so we need deep reforms to give developing countries a much stronger voice and a much stronger participation in our international financial system, as we need Africa to be present in the permanent members of the Security Council, and the same with Latin America. We need to redesign our multilateral institutions to correspond to today's world. Today's world is moving to a multipolar world. The most developed countries every day represent a smaller percentage of global GDP. And the emerging economies, the Chinas, the Indias, the Indonesians, the Vietnams, the Brazils, every single day represent a larger share of the international economy. And so the world is changing to become more and more multipolar, and we need to adapt our institutions to that reality and give more voice to those that today play a bigger role in the international community, and at the same time take care of those continents that face biggest challenges in their economic and social situation, like it is the case of Africa or Latin America.
As Secretary General, you had previously warned the Security Council about the possibilities of genocide and famine in Gaza. And now an independent panel has said conditions there amount to genocide. Do you feel vindicated?
Well, it's not for the Secretary General to do the legal definition of the situations that we have. But what is clear is that this demonstrates once more that we have in Gaza an horrendous situation, the highest level of death and destruction that I've witnessed in my lifetime. And at the same time, with people having situations of famine, with people without any form of health support, with people having to move from place to place in dramatic circumstances. And this is, of course, absolutely morally, politically, and legally intolerable. And this needs to change. We need an immediate, permanent ceasefire in Gaza. We need the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. And we need complete openness in the access for humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza.
Now, I understand that you recently said that Israel is not open to really a serious negotiating as far as
That was
ceasefire.
happened after the attack to Qatar. And indeed, obviously, that attack to negotiators on one hand, and in the country that is the main promoter of peace in the Israel-Palestinian situation, is not compatible with wanting to have a true negotiation.
You must be frustrated that took place, though.
Of course, I am extremely frustrated with the fact that we are not moving into what we have always claimed for. I mentioned the ceasefire, the release of hostages, but also the creation of conditions for the two-state solution to be a possibility, allowing the two countries and the two peoples to live together in peace and security.
Now, as you know, the U.S. has rescinded the visa of President Mahmoud Abbas of Palestine, so he can't even come to the two-state solution Palestine conference that is to take place in the sidelines of the General Assembly. Have you talked to the U.S. about this?
Yes, we are in contact with the US, and we have clearly manifested our position, that is the reality, that this is a clear violation of the host country agreement, and that we still hope that this changes because it is unacceptable.
How would you characterize relations between the U.S. and the UN now, considering the foreign aid cuts?
But the relations between the UN and the US are old relations, and the US have a key role in the build of the UN and the key role in the work of the UN for decades, and we are very grateful to that contribution. At the present moment, we have a situation which indeed we are witnessing massive cuts in the support to the US humanitarian and development activities, but it was not only the UN, it was in general, it was a general policy. And the withdrawal of amounts that had already been budgeted in support to the activities of the UN, the so-called assessed contributions, mandatory that are obligation of member states in peacekeeping and in the regular budgets. And I hope that this problem is solved because, as we have seen in the humanitarian aid, the problem was not for the UN. The agencies reorganized themselves, reduced the staff, reduced their activities. The problem is the people that no longer have food, or the people that no longer have vaccines, or the people that no longer have treatment to HIV/AIDS. And this is what is dramatic in those aid cuts. The same if now it takes place in relation to peacekeeping, that we will, of course, be able to reduce our missions. So it's not a UN problem. It is the problem of the civilians that those peacekeepers are protecting in situations where there is no peace to keep, where armed groups of all kinds act, where terrorist organizations are present, and in which the UN is, in many circumstances, the force of last resort to protect civilians.
I want to pivot quickly to Ukraine. Do you see anything on the horizon that indicates there may even be a settlement or ceasefire at this point?
I think it's essential to have a ceasefire. There's permanent ceasefire and complete ceasefire, and that ceasefire paves the way to a sustainable peace in respect with the values of the Charter, the international law, the resolution of the General Assembly. But I have to recognize that we are far from it, and that the positions of the two sides seem very far apart.
Now, the Turkish Defense Ministry has said that its armed forces are still present in Syria, and they're there because it's within the scope of the right of legitimate self-defense to ensure Turkey's security and combat terrorism. How do you see the security situation right now in Syria?
In Syria, I think the security situation in Syria is, of course, problematic, but I think we need to do all efforts in order to support Syria that emerged from a terrible dictatorship, to support Syria come together, respect its unity and sovereignty, and create conditions of inclusion in order that all communities, be them Sunnis, Alawites, Christians, Druze, all communities feel that their identities are respected, but that they are part of the nation as a whole. And this is a huge effort that needs to be made, and we are ready to support the Syrian institutions in order to make sure that this effort is successful.
This
We
is a
want
very
a united, sovereign Syria, able to be a pillar of stability in the region.
Secretary General, the last time the two of us met 2 years ago, I asked you then where you find the resilience every day to get up and do what you do in the face of daunting attacks these days on the institution that you serve. What's it like for you now?
Well, we are here to fight for what we believe in. And when we have deep beliefs, and the beliefs in the Charter, in international law, international cooperation, the beliefs of equity and justice in international relations are something that make us live and make us fight, whatever the circumstances, whatever the difficulties, we will not give up.
Mr. Secretary General Antonio Guterres, thank you for joining us here on TRT World.
It's a great pleasure.